Asha giggles.
I'm not Superman. If you're walking, I'm walking.
Of course, I understand, you say. It's just that I need to get back to Matthew. They have him in a coma, and if I don't get back to him in 3 days, I don't know what the drugs will do to him. I don't even know if they'll keep him alive.
If you don't want to get stuck in worry and fear, or repeatedly experiencing things you don't want, just practice focusing on what's here in this moment.
My fear about what might happen to Matthew is what's here in this moment.
Okay, try it again. Where do you feel the feeling?
I feel sick to my stomach.
So, what's next?
What do you mean? I'm supposed to breathe into the feeling?
You don't have to do anything. The question is just whether or not you want a different result. Remember I told you the game's prime directive is thy will be done?
Yes, you say hesitantly. But if you care about people, you worry about them.
You can absolutely choose that. You can be anxious, worried, fearful, or even feel victimized. But you are the one who's asking to feel more of that. It's really simple. If you feel worried or afraid, you're not in this moment. You're either focused on the past or on the future.
Yeah, but one time I found a snake under a picnic table. Believe me, I was in the moment and I was terrified.
Were you really terrified about that moment, or were you worried about the future?
Oh, you say thoughtfully. Well, I guess you're right.
Focusing on your breath is an easy way to bring your mind back to the moment. And breathing is just, well, it's always a good idea to breathe.
Theoretically, you agree with Asha, but it isn't easy to take your thoughts off of Matthew and what might happen to him. You try breathing, but you forget about it rather quickly, because it literally takes all of your focus just to keep walking in the dark without tripping or falling. It is slow going, and finally you have to stop and rest. Asha offers you water from a handmade leather flask with a faint scent of beeswax, and then hands you some strange food that tastes like fruit, but it is quite firm and not at all juicy. Part of the skin is smooth, like the cap of a mushroom, but the other parts feel like the gills on the bottom of a toadstool.
Are you ready to keep going?
Says Asha earnestly. Oh yes, I'm feeling better and better, actually, you say, amazed at how different your body is beginning to feel. Breathing this air feels wonderful. As you continue walking, the darkness gradually turns milky, and you can finally walk by yourself without holding Asha's hand. The light in the cavern is diffused and emanates from everywhere around you, glowing equally in all directions. It reminds you of dense fog illuminated by sunlight. But it isn't opaque. The light is glowing, yet at the same time perfectly clear. Rising up through the darkness, the forms of stalactites, stalagmites, and saline incrustations reassert themselves on the walls and high ceilings of the massive cavern. But oddly, there are no shadows. Everything is softly and uniformly lit, as if the light is passing through silk. Where is the light coming from? How is it even possible when we're so deep underground? You ask, utterly fascinated by this phenomenon.
It's sunlight. It just has different characteristics than you've been led to believe. When sunlight strikes the Earth's surface, some of the light is reflected, but most of it passes through the Earth in an altered state, such as you see here. We call it revitalized light or rejuvenated darkness, Asha says merrily.
But what is it exactly that revitalizes the light, you say slowly, or rejuvenates the darkness?
The same thing that will revitalize you as we continue our journey,
says Asha sweetly.
At this depth, the cavern air has a unique life force that supports and maintains everything, from sunlight to plants to human beings who wander in at these depths. No illness exists here. If you had a fatal illness, it would completely disappear in this atmosphere within hours. All caverns at this depth contain the same atmospheric gases.
Why haven't I heard of it before? You ask, puzzled.
Because most humans haven't been deep enough underground to experience any of this. Even Thomas doesn't know what's actually down here. He's been working hard to explore these depths based on legends that he believes are plausible, but no one has ever returned to the base to confirm what he suspects. That's why he's rather desperate for you to make it back.
I don't care whether he's trying to help people or not. He's selfish and mean and not a very good person, you say angrily.
Thomas plays the game his way. You play it your way,
says Asha in a neutral tone. Well, it wasn't my choice to come here. He forced me to come here. He put Matthew in a coma. I hardly think that's me playing it my way, you say indignantly.
One of the things that keeps the game interesting is that you have no idea what you've agreed to with others before you were born,
says Asha mysteriously. I would never agree to what's been happening to me, you say vehemently.
Sometimes what's happening doesn't make sense in the moment, but there may come a time, if your mind is open enough to see, that you'll realize every moment has its own unique perfection, whether you like it at the time or not. You don't know what you're here to do or who you're here to be with, and neither does anyone else. So why not lighten up? You might even have some fun.
You are feeling a bit annoyed to have a 10-year-old talking to you as if she is your mother instead of a kid. But you don't feel like arguing, so you just change the subject. Does it ever get dark down here? You ask.
Nope, says Asha. There's always light somewhere on the surface.
I don't feel tired or thirsty or hungry at all. Is there something in the air? You ask.
Well, the air does play a part of that, but your body is also slowing down. You no longer need your heart and lungs working at full capacity the way you did on the surface. What you think of as gravity is changing as well. You'll find that your movements will become almost effortless the more we descend.
You are bursting with questions, but at this point the cavern narrows into a small tunnel, only 10 feet high by 3 feet wide. You walk through the glowing entrance into a vast chamber rising hundreds of feet high and filled with snow-white alabaster pillars, 4 to 5 feet in diameter. But as you step fully into the chamber and look up, you realize the pillars are not made of stone. They are quite alive and capped with umbrella-like covers, looking like colossal toadstools. These toadstools aren't brown or gray as they are on the surface. It seems as if the sunlight is passing through a prism, bringing with it every primary color of the rainbow to this stunning wonderland. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, along with delicate blends of these colors as well. However, each individual hue is so luminous and brilliant they are barely recognizable compared to common surface colors, which now seem muddy and heavy in comparison. You notice that many of the colored caps are marked with white diamond shapes circles, or other geometrical patterns. Looking around, you see that some of the stems are deep crimson, blue, or green, all standing in straight rows, as if they have been purposely planted in perfect symmetry. You touch one of the stems, expecting it to feel slightly cold and clammy, just as a toadstool in a forest might have felt. But it is wonderfully warm, velvety soft, and surprisingly fragrant. Are these poisonous like the little ones we have on the surface? You ask.
No, not at all. Here they grow in perfect conditions. There is no pollution. Nothing ever changes. The temperature, the minerals they feed on, and the water they need, everything stays constant. So they are, well, perfect.
You walk up to a bright red toadstool that is only 4 feet tall and say, this is so odd. It smells like strawberries.
Taste it,
says Asha, grinning. Gently you tear off a small piece of the toadstool and say, it tastes just like a strawberry, but like the best strawberry I've ever had. How's that possible?
Well, you're not surprised that an apple, a strawberry, and a rose have the same color. Why be surprised when flavors are the same?
Says Asha enthusiastically.
The various colors of these plants are recognizable from colors you've seen on the surface. Why shouldn't you recognize the flavors as well?
You hurry over to a golden toadstool with round white spots and say, this one tastes like pineapple. And then rushing to an indigo blue stem, you inhale the fragrance of fresh blueberries. If I didn't know better, I'd say I was dreaming.
This is where these plants are meant to grow and live. That's why they're so phenomenal,
says Asha, gently stroking a soft white stem. You want to stay and explore this grown-up fairyland, but you know you've already lost sense of time, and you need to get back if there's any chance of saving Matthew. After walking a brief distance, you enter a cavern with brilliant, sparkling crystals, monstrous and cube-shaped, a foot or so in diameter. It seems as if the crystals have been stacked one on top of another, creating a wall here and a cliff face there. Some of the stones are smaller, so you bend down to pick up a square crystal the size of your hand.
Lick it,
says Asha. You lick it and say with surprise, it's salt!
Yes, this is a dried salt bed from what used to be an underground lake.
You think for a moment, then ask, but how could an entire lake evaporate if we're this deep underground?
It couldn't, and it didn't,
says Asha logically.
The water travels to the surface and comes out as a fresh spring.
You're sure there must be an interesting science lesson on the way, but before you can ask any more questions, you suddenly come to a broad chasm that stretches out for what seems like miles in both directions. You tentatively approach the ominous ledge, complete with a sheer cliff that looms over a barely visible cavern floor far below. You let out a frustrated yelp. There is literally no way down, no way back, and no way across. What do we do now? You ask in a complete panic.
Let's jump down,
says Asha lightly. Very funny, you say, laughing awkwardly. You can teleport, but if I jump, I'll break my neck.
No, you won't,
says Asha confidently.
Jump up and see what happens.
Doubtfully, you jump half-heartedly, and with no effort at all, you find yourself bounding a full 6 feet into the air, then landing lightly back on your feet. Your face is a curious blend of shock and utter delight.
See what I mean?
says Asha, smiling brightly as she steps off the cliff. She falls as slowly and softly as an autumn leaf on a warm, still day. Arriving gracefully at the bottom, she calls up to you encouragingly.
Come on, you'll be fine.
Even watching Asha isn't enough to remove your fear, so you practice breathing into the hollowed-out feeling in your stomach. Amazingly, the energy begins to soften. You take a deep breath, and as you step off the ledge, reminding yourself that Asha was right there if anything were to go terribly wrong, you drift down, practically weightless. And though it seems completely impossible, it was happening, and there is no arguing with reality. When you finally touch down, you are so excited you skip and hop with joy, which under the current conditions translates into soaring leaps and bounds across the canyon floor. All feelings of fear and hopelessness vanish, and in a matter of minutes you are running up the sides of the canyon walls and pushing yourself off, bouncing off the ground, and with only the slightest effort you are flying a full 10 to 20 feet into the air. You have never felt happier or more alive and free in your entire life. You and Asha leap over chasms with no effort. You then skip down a declining slope that goes on for miles and miles, but you feel completely energized and not the least bit tired. How is this possible? You say, laughing with joy.
What you would call gravity is changing,
says Asha knowledgeably. Finally, the cavern opens up, and there before you stretches a vast lake that seems to reach out into infinity. The water looks as smooth as glass. There is absolutely no movement upon its surface, not a single ripple, and you can see the rocks lying below the water's surface just as clearly as the rock ceiling overhead. There are surface reflections, but no shadows. Everything glows softly, causing the water to look like nothing you've ever seen before. This is extraordinary, you say, smiling at Asha. The lake is lit from above, below, and all around. Grinning, Asha says,
Well, it's no more extraordinary than the sun shining in the first place.
You laugh. I guess you're right. Together you climb around the lake until you come to a metal boat. Without the slightest effort, Asha easily picks up the boat and places it in the water, even though it's many times her size. She steps into it, then directs you to follow and sit at the stern facing the bow. Your bodies are so light, they barely cause the boat to move when you climb in and sit down. Your back is to the shore as you watch Asha slowly and carefully turn a small lever resting on a part of the boat that projects up from the hull. There is no movement and nothing seems to be happening, so after a few minutes you say, Is there a problem? Is there something we have to do to get the boat started? Asha laughs and says,
We've been on our way since the moment you sat down.
What? You say incredulously. That can't be right. We haven't been moving at all.
Look over your shoulder. Do you see the shore?
You whip around and see nothing but miles and miles of water with no shoreline in sight. You laugh. I don't understand. We don't have oars or wind or even a motor. How is this possible?
We're moving on a current of Earth's electromagnetic energy, says Asha.
With no feeling of movement, the velocity increases each time Asha touches the lever, until at last the boat rises almost completely out of the water, like a bird skimming over the surface. With no shore in sight, you can't estimate your speed. You find a tissue in your pocket, tear it in half, and throw a piece into the air. If we're moving fast, why isn't there any wind? You ask as the tissue falls softly to your feet.
There's a protective shield in front of our boat. It's invisible, and its shape causes the wind to move around us without slowing us down,
says Asha. How fast are we going? You say.
About 900 miles an hour,
says Asha, as if this is a normal occurrence.
Normally, friction would heat up a metal boat and become a big problem at this speed. But the lake below us keeps the boat cool, and we're almost as light as air.
At this point, your mind can't comprehend another thing. The lack of gravity makes no sense. But of course, you're witnessing this yourself, and it makes you wonder how many scientific theories are completely erroneous. At last, you find a pillow and a blanket under your seat and curl up in the bottom of the boat, your thoughts drifting away until you fall soundly asleep.